Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this evening. Thank you very much for being here with me this evening. It's an honor to have the blessing of your time. And as is our usual habit, I will ask you to please raise your hands in your participant box to let me know that you can hear me. Thank you all very, very much for letting me know that I can be heard. It's a great pleasure to see so many of you here. Let's continue with our housekeeping for those of you who are new to the satsang. Those of you who have been here before already know that you can adjust your audio settings in the upper right-hand corner. You can adjust your viewing options as well. You don't have to worry about your microphone or your video camera because I cannot see or hear you, but you can see, and apparently some of you at least can see me as well. If you want my attention, all you have to do is type something into the Q&A box. I will be keeping an eye on that in order to be responsive to your questions and comments, which I welcome. So type something into the Q&A if you so desire. And I will I will make a point of seeing what you have written. All right. Quick recap from last week. We headed into the home stretch of chapter 5, going from karma yoga to mystic yoga. Krishna speaks about finding happiness by turning inward as opposed to looking outward, and how the introspective sage doesn't really find much delight in temporary sense pleasures and the pursuit thereof. There's something higher, there's something more attractive within for one who has gotten a sense of an experience of the self. We also spoke about the difference between equanimity and indifference. I was just having a conversation with someone earlier today about how many people apparently in the modern American spiritual community tend to think that getting mixed up with politics and social issues and stuff is sort of beneath the acceptable vibration level of what they want to associate with. And, you know, it's just the problems of the material world. They come and go, and, you know, not worthy of being engaged with for someone on a spiritual path. And, you know, of course, this is really the rub against thinking about yoga as a transcendental practice, because people who have the luxury of being able to blow off social issues because they're not the ones who are suffering, they don't have problems, you know, they're still getting a good return on their investments, and they don't have to worry about getting shot just for walking down the street. You know, those folks, I'm making some generalizations here, of course, they have the luxury of being able to say, oh, you know, the material world, whatever. And that's indifference. And that's not the same thing as equanimity. Equanimity is when you engage with the world and the world does not throw you for a loop, where you can actually do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And when things go wrong, you don't freak out. And when things go right, you're not ecstatic, you're equipoised in happiness and distress. You understand that the material world, it is what it is. But still, the one thing that a yogi, and particularly a devotional yogi, cannot tolerate is the suffering of others. And we want to contribute to making the world an environment that's suitable for everyone's spiritual advancement. That's why there's a social structure that comes with yoga and yoga philosophy. So I just wanted to hang out with that for a minute in our review, just to make the point that this is really an important distinction to make, this distinction between the equanimity of a yogi who's engaged in the material world, with the material world, without being affected so much by the material world, and someone who is indifferent to the material world on the plea of, you know, it's beneath their vibrational standard. And we closed out last week with assurances from Krishna of the inevitability of our liberation being close at hand for one who is engaged in the practice of karma yoga as he is describing it, which brings us to tonight. We finish up with the yoga of enlightened action. So what we'll do this evening is review chapter 5, and actually we'll step back even farther and just do a fast forward from chapter 2 on up through chapter 5 to see how we got here, and how Arjuna got here, or Arjuna, if you want to be picky about it. We will take a little closer look at our introduction to Ashtanga Yoga as we transition from Karma Yoga in the 5th chapter to Ashtanga Yoga in the 6th. And the last verse of this chapter is Krishna's peace formula. So we'll spend a little extra time with verse 29. We'll cover just 3 verses officially to close out the chapter, 27 through 29. So Arjuna's transformation. We are following along as Arjuna moves through his own transformation as Krishna is speaking the wisdom of the Bhagavad-gita to him. So we begin with Arjuna in a state of material consciousness, chapters 1 through 3, doubt-based questions in chapters 4 through 9, spiritual consciousness in chapters 10 and 11, and then once his spiritual consciousness has been established, then faith-based questions in chapters 12 through 18, and then Arjuna arrives at a transcendental position where he can act with complete freedom and confidence in his position. So here in chapter 5, we're hanging out with doubt-based questions. In chapter 2, Krishna emphasizes knowledge of the distinction between matter and spirit. And this is the prime directive. The understanding that we are not these temporary material bodies, we are eternal spiritual beings. And I say the prime directive because it is Krishna's primary piece of information for us, but it is also the prime directive for all yoga teachers to integrate into their yoga classes if they are teaching yoga as presented by the ancient sages and Krishna himself. So if you are a member of the United Federation of Yoga Teachers, then you have to abide by this prime directive. Teach the distinction between matter and spirit, as Krishna has done in the Bhagavad-gita chapter 2. So there's your official emblem, just in case you need to download the official emblem of membership in the United Federation of Yoga Teachers. Chapter 3 is about the art of action. And chapter 4 is the science of knowledge, transcendental knowledge. So what happens when we get to chapter 5? Well, Arjuna had a question at the start of chapter 3. And then he hears chapter 4, and he comes back in chapter 5 and opens up with what is practically the same exact question. Here's his question in the beginning of chapter 3. This is verse number 1. O Janardana, if discernment and reason are higher than fruitive work, then why do you want me to engage in this horrific warfare? O Keshava, I'm confused by your bewildering instructions. Therefore, please tell me definitively what singular course of action I should take in order to achieve the greatest good, or the greater good. So then Krishna speaks the entirety of chapter 3 and chapter 4, and Arjuna comes back in chapter 5 with basically the same question. Oh Krishna, you are praising both the renunciation of action and spiritual action. Please tell me definitively which one of these two is more beneficial. So what Arjuna has not yet understood is that work or action informed by transcendental knowledge is non-reactive, and therefore it's the same thing as the renunciation of work insofar as the result is concerned. The objective is not to either stop working or engage in work. The objective is to eliminate karmic reactions from actions. And it seems that Arjuna is having trouble wrapping his head around the idea that you can act in such a way as to not generate a reaction. And that's pretty reasonable, because it's pretty counterintuitive to think that there's an action that you can perform that does not generate a reaction. It's not a very Newtonian way of looking at the world. Not only does action informed by transcendental knowledge not generate a reaction, but it's essential for really internalizing and assimilating that transcendental knowledge, because realization is applied knowledge. So in chapter 5, Krishna gives Arjuna a combination of the two, the art and science of knowledge action, or the art and science of action informed by transcendental knowledge. So in this chapter, what Krishna has done is put the two together in order to help Arjuna understand what he means by combining action with renunciation. Yes, live long and prosper. I didn't even know they had a hand raised that would allow you to do that. Okay. So, having conquered the mind and senses, this is now verse 7 from chapter 5. Having conquered the mind and senses, which seems like a very Vulcan thing to do, a purified soul who, by means of spiritual action, remains linked to the Supreme Self within all beings, is never entangled by the actions they perform. So this is the key to understanding this. A spiritual action is an action that has a few components to it. Control of the mind and senses, so that they are directed, they are engaged in activity that is only going to serve the purpose of linking the actor to the Supreme Self within their own heart and within the heart of all other beings. And by constraining one's actions to just those actions that reinforce that link, that strengthen that link, there's no entanglement in karmic reactions as a result. Then in verse 10, Krishna described it in this way. Just as water does not cling to a lotus leaf, misfortune does not cling to those who let go of attachments and offer their actions to the absolute reality. So for one who's solely acting for the sake of purification, purifying the body and mind of all remnants of material entanglement, this is the person who achieves lasting peace. Whereas those who are on the path of personal enjoyment, for them, peace is hard to come by. And as we get towards the end, the last verse where we will speak about the peace formula, then we will look at why that is, take a closer look at why peace is so difficult to come by for those who are absorbed in the pursuit of material life as opposed to spiritual life. Sue, you're just cracking me up every time I see that. All right. Then 522. Pleasures that arise from contact between material senses and the objects of sense enjoyment are actually sources of misery, O son of Kunti. How counterintuitive is that? Why is this so? Because such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and the wise find no delight in them. So just the very fact that they're temporary is one reason. And also we discussed last time that these kinds of pleasures that arise due to contact of the senses with sense objects reinforces one's sense of identity with those senses. And the coherent organization of senses is called a body. So it makes us think all the more, I am this body. The source of my happiness will be this body. And in due course of time, that will simply not be true. It's just a matter of time before the same senses that are a source of pleasure when they are strong and healthy become a source of misery when they get old and cease to function properly. Let's take another look at the yoga ladder. We looked at this last week, and this will be a short review of this. We begin at the bottom of the ladder with animal life. If someone takes birth in an animal form, then one is only really going to be concerned with how can I get food, how can I get shelter, sex life, and defending one's turf. And if a human being is really only concerned with those same four things, finding food, finding shelter, engaging in sex life, and defending one's turf, then there's really not a substantive difference between a human being and an animal. There's perhaps a more sophisticated form of these same four things. But it's the same activity, and a person in an animal body that's suitable for, say, being outdoors all the time will be naturally comfortable in their environment the same way that a human being is comfortable in a suitably human-ish environment. But the activity is the same. The substance is the same. So what's the point in having a human life? Human life, according to the Bhagavad-gita, begins really when one starts to think at the very least in terms of abiding by externally imposed ethics meant to raise one's standard of living. When one recognizes that there is a source for their material comforts. That is to say, when you realize that we don't manufacture the sky and engineer the rain and the sunshine, when we realize that we didn't build the earth in a factory, that these are gifts that are given to us for our sustenance and some kind of gratitude and sense of exchange, a sense of participating in the cycle of nature, the cycle of cosmic order. When that realization kicks in and we start to act in that way, that is understood to be the start of human life. And that's called karma kanda. Now, the objective is still material enjoyment. So that hasn't really changed. But there's a civilized structure to it that raises the level to that of a human, truly a human being. When the goal of one's life becomes realization of transcendental knowledge, then we step up to the next rung on the ladder, which is karma yoga or action yoga. We perform activities, but our motivation changes. We are not so much interested anymore in some kind of economic development for the sake of enjoying our senses, but rather we are acting for the sake of purification of the mind, purification of the heart, purification of the consciousness, the elevation of the consciousness, with an understanding, a basic understanding that we are not these bodies, that we are not these physical bodies, that we are eternal spiritual beings, and the ultimate aim of our lives ought to be to solve all of our problems by getting to the root cause of these problems, which is the consciousness that brings us into a material body in the first place. So now we start to make progress. When our action is informed by knowledge, then we are at the point where we can attain liberation, according to this chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. And one may now think to cease acting in favor of withdrawal of the senses altogether in the pursuit of just 100% dedication to transcendental knowledge. So a jnani yogi, strictly speaking, may be someone who renounces action altogether. And an Ashtanga yogi, the next rung of the ladder, renounces even further still, undertakes austerities. The Ashtanga yogi, as we will hear in chapter 6, is engaged in a very, very internal practice that really doesn't pay much attention at all to the outside world. So from the position of jnana yoga, or the yoga of knowledge, one may attain Brahman realization, realization of the ground of being, the spiritual energy of which everything is ultimately made. And that takes the practitioner beyond the realm of material nature into the realization of the first of the three aspects of the one absolute truth. The Ashtanga yogi, the practitioner of the path of eightfold mysticism, will realize either Brahman or Paramatma, the supreme soul within the heart. And from the position of one realization, you may move to the other, or vice versa. So there's a kind of transcendental social mobility here. But one who has gotten in touch with the Paramatma may be inspired to take up bhakti yoga. And from bhakti yoga, one has the opportunity to realize the personal form of the absolute truth, or Bhagavan realization. And this is an exclusive realization to bhakti yoga. It is only by devotion that the personal form of the supreme absolute truth is revealed, because there's now a relationship of love. And as we've discussed previously, we only reveal ourselves to people we trust, and the people we trust are the people who love us. And the supreme person is a person and behaves a little bit like a person. If we want to understand the supreme person, we can study ourselves. We are a microcosm of that same supreme person. So we only reveal ourselves to people who love us. The supreme person, same standard. And that's why bhakti yoga is the means by which one can develop a relationship wherein the supreme person reveals their personal, unique personal form. Now, the cool thing about bhakti yoga is that we can go directly to bhakti yoga. We don't have to go one rung at a time. You can take the express elevator, go directly to bhakti yoga, and all of the other rungs of the yoga ladder are included, and the other aspects of realization of the absolute truth are also included. So it kind of shifts the realm beyond the modes of material nature all the way down to karma yoga, leaving only human life in pursuit of sensual happiness within the realm of material nature. So this gives you an indication of the power of bhakti yoga, and this power will be reinforced as we move into the 6th chapter about Ashtanga Yoga. Okay, which brings us up to the translations and commentary for the 3 verses that we are going to focus on for the balance of our time together this evening. Do any of you have any questions or comments about the review that we just did through some of the earlier chapters and in a little more detail through this 5th chapter of Bhagavad-gita? If you've got any questions or comments, please go ahead and pop them into the Q&A window, and I will look for them. And as I am anxiously awaiting your questions and comments, I will read the translation for verses 27 and 28. Shutting out all external sense objects, with eyes directed toward a point between the eyebrows, equalizing the inward and outward breaths that move through the nose, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist who aspires for liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who maintains this state of being is surely liberated. So this is our introduction into Ashtanga Yoga. And another way of translating this is, rather than equalizing the inward and outward breaths that move through the nose, another word I've seen used here is suspending the inward and outward breaths. As we move into the 6th chapter, we're going to see a detailed description of some pretty fancy pranayama, some pretty fancy control of the life force. So here, shutting out all external sense objects. In Patanjali's system, this is known as pratyahara, which is the 5th limb of the 8-limb system of yoga that Patanjali describes, coming immediately after pranayama. So prana, the life force, either yama, its restraint, or ayama, its liberation by control. So here we've got these two together, plus with eyes directed toward a point between the eyebrows. So the focus is on your 3rd eye chakra, right up above and between your eyebrows. And this is inner vision or your eyes. Your eyes actually hang out there. You know, we have seen illustrations of this, and perhaps we've even practiced this. And by this practice, one gains control of the mind, the senses, and the intelligence. So what Krishna is describing here is a kind of a mechanical process of bringing the movements of the life force under control in order to exercise control of the mind and senses. The mind is the reservoir of the senses. So if you bring your senses under control, then you're controlling essentially the rivers that feed into the pool of the mind. And that is why control of the senses by observance of yamas and niyamas is emphasized in Patanjali's system. Because the whole objective is to bring the mind to a point of stillness so that we can see the true nature of the self reflected in the calm pool of the steady mind. So in order to make the mind still, you control what flows into it. It's an easy visual to understand, because if you have, let's just say, 5 different water faucets all going off at different times in different intensities in a sink with the stopper in it, then the water is going to just bounce all over the place. And that's what happens with our mind. When our senses are not controlled, we just get input and all levels of intensity at all different times, and then the output is the bouncing of the waves, the turbulence of the water. But if we take all 5 of our input senses and adjust it so that there's just a steady light stream of water coming down into the sink, then the water stays more or less level, calm, as opposed to choppy and bouncing all over the place. So this is the idea. The control of the senses through yamas and niyamas is first. Then asana, finding your comfortable seat, for all intents and purposes, is really the only asana involved here. Or doing what is necessary to allow yourself to be able to sit comfortably. Then pranayama, then turning the senses inward, and then meditation, the focus of the inner vision on the third eye chakra. Thus, everything comes under control, and focus on an object of meditation can begin. And one who is able to maintain that state of controlled senses and mental equilibrium is sure to find liberation. Now, Krishna is going to close out this chapter with an interesting pivot. And this is the verse that we're going to chant this evening. So I will bring our screen back up. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, there's always one verse for each of our classes where we chant in call and response fashion. I will chant one line, you will chant that line back, and so forth. This is transliterated Sanskrit with diacritical marks indicating pronunciation cues. So the bar over a vowel, like the A, means that it is a very open ah sound as opposed to a short sound. The dot over a vowel, like an M, means that you close your lips in front, but also the back of your tongue against the back roof of your mouth, as if you are wrapping your mouth around a little walnut. The tilde over an N indicates a nya sound, and a J and an N with a tilde combination can, and I have heard it pronounced as a soft J nya sound, but it is more commonly pronounced like a G and an N sound, gya, like a G, Y, A. An accent mark over an S indicates an SH sound, but not just an SH sound that we're accustomed to pronouncing in English, like the word she, but rather all the way, it is pronounced all the way in the back of your mouth. So there's a lower kind of white noise that comes out. So normally it's a high white noise, shh, as opposed to the accent mark over the S is a lower pitched white noise. Then the dot under the R is a re sound. And I think that pretty much covers all of our diacritical marks for this particular verse. So I chant, and then you chant back. Here we go. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam Yatva mam shantim richchati. Okay. One more pronunciation note. A C in transliterated Sanskrit is always a CH sound. If you want a K sound, you get a K. If you want an S sound, you get an S. So the C is used for a CH sound, and when you have a C and a CH together, then that means you double the sound up. So in this case, that last word at the end of the fourth line in this verse is richchati. So you actually hit the CH sound twice and put a little extra air for the H after the second instance. Our translation. Peace is attained by knowing me to be the beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the Supreme Lord of all worlds, and the most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings. So this brings up a few interesting ideas. This is known, by the way, as the peace formula, the Bhagavad-gita's peace formula. Many of us are interested in peace. All of us beauty contest contestants are all interested in world peace, and probably everyone else as well. And we're all interested in personal peace, peace for ourselves. Earlier in the chapter, Krishna spoke about how one attains happiness, and one cannot expect reasonably to be happy if one is not peaceful, if one is not experiencing peace. So, how is this peace attained? Well, Krishna has spoken previously about how work for Vishnu must be performed, otherwise it is binding, which means you stay here in this material world. Staying here in the material world is itself not a very peaceful proposition. In order to experience happiness in this condition, we have to put the temporary nature of our material bodies out of our mind. If we're always cognizant of the fact that this body will someday cease to work and we will have to leave it, if we're always aware of death, then we'll be morose. Or at least our ability to enjoy the world will be tempered. So, for example, if we were on an airplane flying across the ocean. Now, I'm here in America, so let's just say we were going to fly to Paris. It's a very beautiful city. For those of you who've not been there, it's worth checking out. Your senses will enjoy it very much. So we'll go to Paris. We'll fly to Paris in anticipation that we will enjoy beautiful Paris. And the flight attendant gets on the loudspeaking system and says, we have a wonderful selection of movies for you that you can enjoy. And we have a wonderful special gourmet meal that we will be serving you that you can enjoy on our flight. And we didn't actually fill the plane completely with fuel, so we're actually not going to make it all the way to Paris. We'll probably crash halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. So enjoy your movie, and we'll be coming around with your delicious feast in just a few minutes. There's a pretty good chance you will not take as much pleasure in watching the movie and eating dinner knowing that the plane is going to crash into the Atlantic Ocean. But if you put that thought out of your mind, then perhaps you'll be able to enjoy yourself for a little while. And that's actually our situation. Once we become cognizant that this world is temporary, then it's really, really hard to be peaceful about things. And we don't find peace from life in the material world. Fortunately, there's two sides to this coin, which is, the other side is, we're actually eternal spiritual beings having a temporary material experience. And if we focus on developing our spiritual experience, then the material experience won't seem quite as tragic. And that's what yoga is for. And throughout the Gita, so far, Krishna has made a very explicit connection between action informed by knowledge and sacrifice. And that the beneficiary of the sacrifice is Vishnu. So here, instead of referring to Vishnu, which is really a way of Krishna speaking about himself in the third person, he now says directly, me. This is kind of about me. I'm actually the person who is the beneficiary of whatever sacrifice you make. And whatever austerities you perform them for my sake. Now here's the other thing. I'm the supreme, Krishna says, I'm the supreme Lord of all the worlds. This is Sarva Loka Maheshwara, Maha, great, Ishvara, the Lord. So Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, I am the great Lord of all the worlds. Usually we do not ask the question, well, whose world is this anyway? We assume that the world is here for us. And, you know, the world is our oyster. And we take the attitude that we can make the world whatever we want it to be. But what the Bhagavad-gita is telling us is that the world does not actually belong to us. And if we try to make the world our oyster, basically we're thieves. We're taking something that doesn't belong to us and using it for our own purposes rather than for the purposes of the person who's actually the owner. It's just like taking anyone's property that doesn't belong to you and using it for your own purposes. And if you know that you're taking stuff that doesn't really belong to you and using it for purposes for which it really was not intended, it's really hard to be peaceful. If someone is a thief, then there's the anxiety associated with the possibility of getting caught. And if you get caught, well, there's a penalty to be paid because stealing is against the law. And it's also against the law of cosmic order. And therefore, that is why Krishna is advising us to redirect our actions in such a way as to not have to pay the penalty of karmic reactions that keep us in material bodies that are the cause of our suffering when we identify with them because they get old and die. So recognizing that the world is not ours, it doesn't belong to us, it's not something that we can just use for our own purposes, but rather, when we see that Krishna, Vishnu, the Supreme Person, is actually the proprietor of the world, and the world is meant to be used in service to the fulfillment of the desires of that Supreme Person, or for the sake of pleasing the Supreme Person, either out of duty karma yoga, proper understanding, jnana yoga, or love, bhakti yoga, then one arrives at a peaceful situation. Not only does one arrive at that on an individual level, but if world governments, if nations around the world also accepted this idea, then rather than competing for natural resources that don't belong to any of them, they would engage those natural resources in service to the one unifying factor that actually connects us all together. So this is a formula not just for personal peace, but for social peace. The recognition that everything belongs to the Supreme Person. There's a verse in the Sri Ishopanishad as well, indicating that one should only take one's allotment for their basic necessities of life without aspiring to build up some artificial wealth, knowing well that all wealth is ultimately the property of the Supreme Person. So it's not just in the Bhagavad-gita that we hear this. The Upanishads also confirm this same idea. And finally, knowing that I am the most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings. So it's not just some one-way street where God owns everything and you can't have anything. And it is not some mean-spirited greediness or jealousy on the part of the Supreme Person. This is just the way it is. There's a very nice description in another yoga wisdom text, the Srimad Bhagavatam, that describes how the universe itself is the form of the Supreme Person. And all of us, as manifestations of matter within the universe, are all part of that same Supreme Person, but we're the part as opposed to the whole. And the really far out thing for me in that is the idea that the universe itself is a person who is self-aware and aware of us. That just blows my mind every time I sit with that. Not only self-aware and aware of us, but favorably disposed towards us. The most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings. So this isn't even an implication of a relationship, it's a statement of a relationship. Krishna is saying to Arjuna, I'm your friend. I'm everyone's friend. And what happens when you offer something to a friend? Well, there's reciprocation because it's a relationship of friendship. Someone who's your friend doesn't just take what you offer them without any reciprocation, without any gratitude, without any sense of engaging in a reciprocal way. So this is a pretty cool idea, that the recognition of the position of Krishna as the ultimate object or person to whom all sacrifices are meant to be offered. The person who doesn't actually need anything because he's the proprietor of everything. And the person who is your best buddy. Realizing that, peace is assured. If you have any questions about this, go ahead and pop them into the Q&A box. As we come into the home stretch, I have something else I want to share with you about this. So we want to engage in activities in the world that are for the benefit of others. There's one of the verses here, in verse 25 in the 5th chapter, Krishna says that those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings. So all the living beings within whom Krishna resides. A yogi who is engaged in this path is characterized by being always busy working for the welfare of all living beings. And yet, doing so in a way that doesn't generate any karmic reaction. Amazing. So how do we do that? You know, someone who is inclined to turn their back on the world, you know, there's some legitimacy to that. Thomas Merton wrote something very eloquent about how his being a monk, withdrawing from the world, was actually a kind of political protest against the ways of the world. For most of us, we're not going to take that path. We're going to be engaged in the world. We want to do something to make a difference in the world, to make the world a better place for everyone's spiritual potential to be met. So how do we do that? So for those of you who are watching, what you're looking at is a worksheet that I developed in order to make it a little easier to connect the values of yoga with the ethical and behavioral guidelines, which in turn have a corresponding inward action and action strategies that allow you to come up with a tactic based on spiritual values that can be applied to any field of action, any particular cause, whatever cause you are naturally inclined to gravitate towards. You can connect a spiritual value to one of 4 possible strategies for action, which are service, advocacy, direct action, otherwise known as confrontation, and non-cooperation, and come up with a tactic. Make a moral decision as to what you will actually do according to time, place, and circumstance in any one of these strategy categories based on one of these spiritual values, which are austerity, purity, mercy, truthfulness, inquiry, and devotion. Here's a close-up for those of you who are watching as opposed to listening, just so you get a better view of what this is. Now, if you are listening, don't despair, because I am going to give you a URL where you can download this as a PDF file. It also has a couple of examples of how you might fill in a tactic to go with a strategy based on a given value. So for my spiritual activism worksheet, you can, there's it's a page on my website. I'm going to give you the bit.ly address. So it's shortened up. So it's bit.ly/ capital HKD values action worksheet. And because I'm not too bright, I put capital letters on each of the first words. It may very well work with all lowercase letters because the internet is just like that. And when I tried to make another bit.ly link today, because I'd forgotten that I'd already made one, then the bit.ly robot said, that URL is already taken. And I'd done it all with lowercase letters. So it may work just as well with lowercase letters as uppercase letters. Anyway, so feel free to download this worksheet and then send me questions. let me know what you're thinking about it. Tell me how you're going to use it. Tell me how you're going to figure out how to engage in action informed by transcendental knowledge that's directed to a cause in the material world that will help move the world in a healthier direction, a more natural way of living, a way of life that promises to bring you and I and everyone else peace by moving us in the direction of recognizing these principles of spiritual life, that the Supreme Person is the beneficiary of all sacrifices, the Lord of all worlds, the ultimate proprietor of everything, and the benevolent friend within all beings. Okay, so tonight we reviewed chapter 5. We took a quick look at Ashtanga Yoga, the eightfold path of mystic yoga, and we spent some time hanging out with Krishna's peace formula, this last verse at the end of the Bhagavad-gita. Do you have any questions or comments for me? Please send them my way, either now or after the fact. You can send them to me at hari@harikirtan.com. Meanwhile, while I anxiously wait for your questions, we have this from the Department of Shameless Self-Promotion Department. In October 20th and 21st, I will be returning to Sol Yoga in Frederick, Maryland for a weekend discussion of the Bhagavad-gita. So I'll be bringing out the overview of the whole Gita from start to finish. So if you're the kind of person who just has to read the end of a book first, you can come and we'll get to the end. Otherwise, you have to wait for like a few years before we get to the end this way. Please join me for this. This will be a really very fun, interactive way of exploring the big picture of the Bhagavad-gita and getting into a few of what I consider to be the most prominent and important details, including 8 life lessons that the Bhagavad-gita offers us. So that's coming up at Sol Yoga, one of my favorite places. I was actually just there last night. And I thank them very much for having me as a part of their yoga teacher training program and a regular visitor with workshops. It's always a great joy to be up there. Okay, next week, the yoga of eightfold mysticism. We'll look at Krishna's idea of who is really a true mystic. We'll look at the role of renunciation in mystic yoga, as opposed to the role of renunciation in action yoga. And we'll look at a description of how the mind can be our friend or the mind can be our enemy. We will cover verses 1 through 6 in chapter 6. And that's what I got for you all tonight. I thank you all very, very much for spending your time with me. It's always a great honor and a privilege for me to spend my time with you. I am looking forward to your questions after the fact, and I hope you all have a very, very, very nice night. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. All right.